Gas stove legislation, banning TikTok, federal school safety legislation, and banking rules. Just a few of the big headlines on Capitol Hill this morning. Florida Congressman Byron Donalds joining us to break down some of these. Good to see you, Congressman.
Good morning. Good to see you.
There was bipartisan legislation that passed the House yesterday to prevent Biden's Department of Energy from adding new strict regulations on gas stoves. In fact, 29 Democrats voted with the GOP on this amendment. So tell us more about the legislation and what else you think Americans need to pay attention to when it comes to potential energy policy changes from the Biden administration.
Well, look, it's very simple. The Department of Energy came out with this, this silly proposal about wanting to ban gas stoves, something that millions of Americans have used, enjoy, love. Frankly, the gas stoves, they cook better than the electric stoves. I think everybody basically knows that. But they wanted to take this through a rulemaking as opposed to just letting the market and commerce dictate it. So members of Congress have responded. We want to make sure that we protect the ability for the American people to purchase goods and services in our country. Gas stoves are not a clear and present danger to America's energy security or anything else. And so we stood up to stop it. And I'm glad that there were Democrats who joined us in this common sense piece of legislation.
Congressman, another piece of legislation that is getting bipartisan support from Democrats as well is banning TikTok and really any other technology from foreign adversaries that could be spying on us. There are some members, though, specifically of the GOP, raising questions about the Restrict Act. I know there's two acts, but specifically they're raising questions about the Restrict Act, worried it would give the federal government too much power. How do you balance national security safety with personal liberty and prevent government overreach, especially in the tech world? What is your thoughts on the Restrict Act?
Well, look, the Restrict Act is, to me, just way too restrictive, if, no pun intended. Look, what we can't do is have essentially what some of my colleagues have referred to it as the Patriot Act 2.0, because we are obviously concerned about Chinese infiltration through social media using TikTok. That doesn't mean now that we are going to go through this process of essentially criminalizing all Americans through a supervisory campaign on what they have on their phones. That just doesn't make any sense. I think there's a pathway to where we can ban applications like TikTok because it does give a window from the communist Chinese regime over there to view the decision-making processes and the thought processes of the American people, especially young Americans.
It's so interesting to see both sides of this debate. Yesterday on the Senate floor, we had Missouri Senator Josh Hawley and Kentucky Senator Rand Paul really disagree over the Restrict Act and the other act, which is the No TikTok on U.S. Devices Act. And the argument there was about government interference with free speech. I want you to listen to what Senator Hawley had to say.
I didn't realize that the First Amendment contained a right to espionage. The senator from Kentucky mentions the Bill of Rights. I must have missed the right of Chinese governments to spy on Americans in our Bill of Rights.
Congressman, what's your response to that?
Listen, I think this is an interesting debate amongst two, strong conservatives in my party. But yeah, there is legitimate concerns about China's spying capabilities of the American people. And it's just simply using the same social media algorithm of our companies in the United States. And what they really do is they kind of take a digital picture of your desires, your thought processes, your decision making, and they use that to monetize. We don't want that to be used by the Chinese government to understand the thought processes of the American people and their decision matrix. We don't want that. So I do think there are some serious national security concerns which may fall into conflict with just free speech. But I don't think it's the government taking away all abilities for the American people to communicate. It is taking away the ability of one of our greatest adversary on the globe from being able to spy on Americans.
Congressman, you have three boys. I know how much you value education and also safety at schools. And as some have put it, we put security guards outside of banks to guard money. How much more precious are our children? In the wake of that devastating tragedy in Nashville, should there be federal legislation requiring all schools to have armed guards outside on patrol?
Well, that's going to be very difficult to do federally because obviously most police power, which people really need to understand, policing power actually happens at the state level. So if you want to talk about the hardening of schools, security at schools, that's something that in Florida we did after the Parkland shooting. But for private schools, because they are private That's something that typically those schools engage in on a case-by-case basis. I think if you bring it federally and have a federal requirement on it, then I don't think you're really going to get the bang for your buck. This is something where at the state level,
what do you
they
think
should
the
be
solution
examining
here?
security protocols.
Right. What do you think the solution is?
It's obviously security protocols at schools. I think that when you have an open target or a soft target, these shooters, they might be crazy, but they're not stupid. And they go to the softest target that they can find or the easiest way to inflict damage. That's why in Florida, we embarked on a series of hardening measures for our schools.
Also, you have an extensive financial background. Democrats right now saying we need more banking regulations to prevent any more bank failures. But some argue, how would more rules help those who some say are breaking the rules? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, look, we had a hearing on this yesterday. More rules would not have stopped what had happened at Silicon Valley Bank. The Federal Reserve is now basically saying that they had all the tools, but they were in their supervisory process and things were lost. SVB didn't follow some of the sightings of their regulatory examinations that they needed to follow. They weren't following them. And then here we go. One of the things that I think is clear is that there might be some concerns about the ability of the Fed to actually supervise banks. And it's not just from too big to fail or a systemic event, but what happens in these pockets across the United States. We got more work to do, but more legislation, in my view, more regulation is not the answer.